Okay, folks, so I am going to lay out why we are reading the first 13 pages of Michel Foucault's The History of Sexuality. Bear with me, some of this, see, already I'm screwing stuff up. So here, let me slow it down a little bit. I am relearning how to use this program, Doceri, so once again, bear with me. But we'll be doing our lectures via this program, so I'll do my very best. Okay, so some central questions, and actually, let me slow it down again, that I want us to be thinking about as we complete course material. And these are the kinds of questions. So when I ask you to think about and consider Foucauldian questions when you are looking at media sources, maybe listening to a podcast, watching a video, I want you to be thinking about these kinds of questions as you do that work. And also, after I go over this lecture, if you're still confused about what Foucault is doing, please go back to his 13 pages and perhaps, in fact, get online and do some research, some extra research about, what is Foucault's main point? What is Foucault doing? Because some folks are going to have trouble beyond this lecture, and you can always meet with me via Skype, but do a little bit of research on your own too, because there's a lot of research or a lot of writing about Foucault's work out there on the internet. So do that, again, read the 13 pages, and if you need more help, get online, look him up, and then if you still need to clarify some things after watching this lecture, then certainly speak with me. Okay, so some main questions that I want you to be thinking about with regard to this particular class and some, Foucauldian questions is, for example, first, how did we get to our current definition of family to begin with? And Risman does a really, really wonderful job of kind of like laying that out for us, like how the history of family, what does it look like? How did we get to where we are now? And how do kind of past definitions of family impact how we think about family now as well. Also, what so there are multiple definitions in many cases. What do these definitions produce? So what is a nuclear family model, for example, understanding what does that particular model produce, and we'll be getting into that quite a bit more as we finish up the session. And then also, connected to what we're reading in these first 2 weeks, linking up Foucauldian work or Foucauldian questions with the dyadic imaginary piece. So we could be asking, what does coupledom produce? When we focus on the couple only, what do we fail to see with regard to relationships? And also when we focus on coupled language, right? So language about love, for example, that is very coupled, what do we fail to see with regard to how love and intimacy might play out? Okay, what's left out? What's invisible when we only think about love happening between a couple? Okay, so let me finish that up. Again, I'm just relearning how to do this, so bear with me. Okay, so in short, let's move on to the next one. I want us to think about how Foucault is more or less asking us to question everything. So Foucault is asking us to question social categories, social interactions, assumptions we make about bodies, especially when we naturalize bodies. So when we hear somebody say something like, well, all straight people do this, or all men do this, or all women do this, I want you to take a second, use Foucault, use sociology to first ask the question, well, why are we conflating all men? Why are we saying that all men do one thing? And then why are we also naturalizing bodies, right? Why are we saying that, because this person is marked as man, they're necessarily going to do this thing that women don't do, for example. So, what in our literature, what, particular kinds of literature naturalizes the discourse about gender and sexuality. I want us to be thinking real critically about that to begin with. So you'll hear things in the media all the time, like these kind of sweeping claims that folks will make about, well, all gay people do this or think this. Take a second, use your sociological imagination, stop for a second, back up, and ask the question, wait, why are we lumping all gay people together, first of all? Why aren't we focusing on practice, right? Sexuality is a social practice. Why are we saying that, well, first of all, that there are gay people as a category, as a universal category to begin with? How did we get there? And then second, once we've gotten there, why are we then, again, naturalizing the body of a so-called gay person and saying that they all do one thing or another? So again, questioning everything. So Foucault is asking us to question categories like this to begin with, and then also to ask what the categories produce. And in particular, as a sociology course, we want to be asking, so when these categories are used and used to mark people and used to talk about how people interact, what kinds of inequalities are produced in those that category making and that marking of bodies. So that's really a central question as a sociology course that we want to be asking. So what kind of inequalities are produced in marking bodies? Okay, so let's end with an example. Let me hopefully be moving on. Okay, so some final examples we can think about, or some final questions, Foucauldian questions that we can think about. And I'm just using the example of Bob's Burgers because I love this show. But you can do this with any media source, right? So you can use any media portrayal of family to ask the questions that we're asking here. So the kinds of questions we might want to ask, and again, using Foucault, how does family play out here? What does family even look like on this show? What type of family is here? So we see kind of like more or less a nuclear family here. And what does that even mean? What does this particular type or this nuclear family produce on the show? So what does it produce with regard to social interactions, with regard to social positions? And if you're not sure what I mean when I say all these things, please go back to the very first mini lecture. What does it produce with regard to sexual and gender identity, race and class? And how do the characters challenge assumptions about the nuclear family? So we can think about that. So there are some really, really hilarious things that happen on this show where gender assumptions, sexuality assumptions, class assumptions are challenged. Where does that happen? But then also there's things that happen on the show where inequality is held up, right? So where assumptions about gender and sexuality aren't, these kind of like stereotypes about gender, sexuality, race, and class are kind of held up. And so that's an interesting thing to think about as well. And you can do this with any media source out there. Bob's Burgers was just one that I'm using here. So that's what I just want to end with. I just want us to be thinking about how to usefully use some material, some sexuality material out there, how in particular Foucault is used in family literature to kind of give you guys a little bit of a foundation. And I'll be saying a little bit more about the dyadic imaginary in a second here. But again, Risman's work is really, really wonderful, does a whole lot of this, really uses a Foucauldian lens in some cases to look at family. And so I thought this would be a nice foundation for us to kind of start with as we move forward. Okay, thanks. Bye.